Hey folks, how is everyone doing today? I thought let me go live today because of the significance of this topic that I wanted to talk about. Today, Wednesday, the 5th of November, the oral arguments were made in the US Supreme Court with regards to the legality and the constitutionality of President Trump's tariffs. That is what has been happening today. And it seems that these tariffs might very well be declared unlawful, or they might be declared unconstitutional by the US Supreme Court. And obviously, for me, such a prospect is a scary prospect because I support President Trump's policies, especially these particular policies are the policies that I support the most. I don't support everything that President Trump does, obviously. I don't think that there's a need for me to say that. But this is one area in which me and President Trump are in full agreement with. Having spoken to Americans about this issue of Trump's trade policies, Trump's tariffs in the past 6 months to a year, and also before that, having spoken to various of my American friends, neighbors, um, colleagues, and foes alike, I've realized that Americans tend to have a certain discomfort with this issue of tariffs. And this discomfort seems to come from the idea that these tariffs are actually causing some pain to the American consumer. And the question is this pain an issue that is important consideration? Or is it that the stakes are so high that the American consumer should be willing to accept and endure some of the short term, even medium term pain for the sake of winning this war? And my answer to that question would be I would answer the question by asking a question. Americans have to ask themselves this question: how did you get here? How did you get here? How did you get to a place where China is basically wiping the floor with your ass? How did that happen? How did it happen that China is wiping the floor not just with America, but with the EU, with everyone else in the world? How did it happen? How did you let it happen? I'll tell you how you let it happen. One of the ways that you let it happen is because it was just way too painful to compete. It's one of the things. It's just easier to roll over and die. It's just easier to roll over and just let the Chinese fuck you in the ass. That's basically what's been happening in the past 40 years. And the fact that a man comes now and says, guys, we can't continue in this fashion. Put aside the issue that half of you hate Trump for whatever reason. We're not going to go into the issues of why people hate Trump. That's fine. That's besides the point right now. But Trump is what, 75 years old? This man is not going to live for another 20 years. He might die maybe in the next 20 years. This matter is not even about Trump. This man is going to die in the next 20 years. But the question is that where will America be 50 years from now vis-a-vis China? That's really the question that Americans need to ask and answer. Where will America be 50 years from now, long after Trump has died? Where will America be? That's the question that you need to ask. Where will America be with regards to the quantum supremacy battle? Where will America be when it comes to the issue of industrial dominance? Where will America be in terms of its economy vis-a-vis the Chinese economies? If you want to answer those questions honestly, and America continues in this fashion, without these tariffs, America will not have any incentive to bring all of the industries that America has yielded to China. And the issue here is not even about America per se. If you look at the United Kingdom, 100 years ago, the United Kingdom's economy was 80%, 8% of the global economy. Today, the United Kingdom economy is less than 2% of the global economy. What happened? The United Kingdom stopped competing on the industrial side of things. The United Kingdom stopped competing. It yielded. It rolled over and died. That is what happened. And one of the problems that have happened is that it's not just that the European Union, the United Kingdom stopped competing. Also, the rest of Europe stopped competing. Europe made the cynical decision that it is better not to produce stuff and ship the production to Asia. And subsequently, in the past 40 years, Europe has been exporting millions of jobs per year to Asia. And it's not just exporting millions of jobs a year to Asia, to China. It's to India, it's to South Korea, it's to Japan, it's to Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, you name it. And obviously, I hold no ill will towards any of these Asian nations. They have won. They have done what matters, and their people are winning. And they are lifting millions of their people out of poverty, and they are giving their people a better life while the West continues to fall behind. And so, what President Trump decided to do by imposing these sanctions is to say, by imposing these sanctions, no one imagines that immediately industrial jobs are going to return in America in the next 6 months. It doesn't work like that. It takes 5 to 10 years to build a plant. It takes even longer to run the plant efficiently. But by imposing these sanctions, which are supposed to continue way long after he left office and way long after he died, is to say, at the very least, let's give America a fighting chance. Let me tell you something. If the US Supreme Court declares that these sanctions are unconstitutional or are unlawful, and subsequently maybe the US Congress does not do anything to pass them into law, I can promise you now that 50 years from now, the Chinese economy will be the biggest economy in the world, number one. And number two, 20 years after that, just say 70 to 80 years from now, the Chinese will have the largest military in the world. In fact, these predictions are, it's possible that those things would even happen much sooner than that. And the question for me to the American people is that, where do you want to be 50 years from now? Where do you want to be 50 years from now? I know that there's a lot of people in the West. I mean, I speak to a lot of Americans about this. A lot of Americans have given up. They think that the fight is lost already. They think that there's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that can be done. The horse has bolted. There is this sort of general understanding that, you know what, we've already lost. Why bother? Maybe you're right. But as the title of this video says, that I got this line from Game of Thrones, that you have two options. Either you fight and you die, or you surrender and you die. What are you going to do? Fight or die, or surrender and die. Those are the two options that the West has right now. Those two options should be, the choice should be very obvious to all of us. That the only option available to any one of us is the option of fighting. Because if you are fighting, you might still lose this battle. But if you don't fight, the conclusion is what is called a foregone conclusion. In the past 40 years, the West has not been fighting. In the past 40 years, the West has been shipping its technology to Asia. Right now, as we speak, one of the largest processing companies of of rare earth minerals in the world was an American founded company, which was sold to a Chinese consortium in 1995. 1995. It completed its move from the United States to China around 2000, resulting in China having 90% of processing capacity of rare earth minerals in the world. Why? Because Americans decided to ship their technology to Chinese firms. This has been happening across many sectors. Americans or even Europeans come up with the technology. The Chinese come, they offer you money to buy it, and then you, because you are stupid, you agree to sell technology to them. And then 20 years later, 30 years later, now you're realizing that they are controlling 90% of a sector that is critical to you. Right now, as we speak, China produces 90% of advanced pharmaceutical ingredients. 90% of all the form of the drugs that are consumed. I'm talking here about medicines, chronic drugs, chronic medicines in the United States. 90% to 80% to 90% of these drugs, their ingredients are manufactured in China. 90% of certain pharmaceuticals, life-saving pharmaceutical drugs that are being consumed around the world. We're talking about drugs for cancer, drugs for HIV treatment, drugs for hypertension, drugs for whatever you can think of. 90% of which are produced in China. How did you guys let this happen? How did you let this happen? This is not an issue of America alone. How did the world let this happen? How did EU let this happen? How did even South Africa let this happen? Because South Africa has the capacity to produce its own drugs. How did you folks let all of this stuff to happen? Because if you have one nation, put aside the fact of whether this nation is an adversary or not, if you have one nation producing 90% of all the drugs that are consumed by your people for life-saving procedures, including surgical drugs, by the way, oncology drugs, produced by one nation. What happens when you go to war with that nation? What happens when there's a global pandemic as it happened in 2020, 2021, and then Europe and the US started realizing, hold on a second, we can't get access to life-saving drugs that we need because we shifted the production of these drugs to one nation in the world. How did you let this happen? And so for me, it's not a matter of, I think for now, it's way past the matter of who has supremacy on the industrial space. It is a matter of life and death at this point. Industrialization is a matter of life and death. It's a matter of who controls your destiny, who controls your future. It is. I would rather have America relies for its products on 4 or 5 nations as opposed to relying on one nation. Because just the common sense alone means that if you're relying on 4 or 5 nations, you have diversified and reduced the risk. When you have one nation controlling 90% of the products that you need, folks, I don't know how did 5 American presidents and subsequent Congresses allow this to happen, honestly. But with that said, and the point of this video is to say, President Trump's tariffs are a matter of life and death. They are so crucial for bringing back industry to the United States. This will not happen overnight. No one expects it to happen overnight. There's already trillions of dollars that have been pledged back into the US. There's a lot of work happening in Florida right now. There's a lot of work happening in Texas. In fact, there's a lot of work happening in Tennessee and also in West Virginia as well. There's quite a lot of work. Plants being repurposed, plants being recommissioned, if you want to use that term, so that they can actually resume production. There's a lot of work actually happening right across the United States in terms of resuscitating and rebuilding the American industrial base. That's very important. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be a couple of months, and it's not even going to be a couple of years. This is a project that's going to take 5 to 10 years or even longer. This is a project that's going to outlast President Trump. This is a project that needs to be continued by whoever is the next American president. This is a project that needs to be made into law by Congress going forward. This is so important that it cannot just be a partisan issue. I know a lot of people in the left like to complain about the unaffordability of life in the United States and all that bullshit. But I'm telling you something. You cannot be complaining about the unaffordability of life in the United States, but at the same time refusing to fight to rebuild the American industrial base. Who led Detroit to be what it is right now? How did Detroit move from being the biggest automaker in the world to being a ghost city? How did that happen? Who let that happen? These are the questions that really need to be answered by American people. And it's not just a matter of President Trump. As I said, that this is an old man who is doing his second term, who is 75 years old, who will die maybe in 15 or 20 years' time. This is a question that needs to be answered by Americans in terms of where do you see the United States of America in the next 50 years? Answer that question for me. If you answer that question, then you can make decisions about what are the best policies right now. Because it goes beyond about, oh, soybean farmers are not able to sell soybeans in China. Okay, maybe that's an inconvenience. We can work around that and do something about that. But there's something a lot more important than about the fact that soybean farmers are being used by China to inflict pain on Americans. Pain is part of growth. I can tell you now that when China was building themselves up to be this industrial behemoth that they are today, it was very painful. It was decades of pain. You do not become what they are without pain. In fact, you do not become what America had been in the 20th century, being the largest industrial power in the world without pain. If you want something big, if you want something important, there's going to be pain. No pain, no growth. So, but with that said, I'd say that there is a lot of pessimism around this issue of industrialization in the US. We've already lost. We've already lost. China has already won. Okay, maybe. But you have a choice. You have two choices. Two choices only. Either you fight and probably die, or you surrender and definitely die. The choice is yours. But the difference is that if you are fighting, you have a chance of actually winning this war. In this war, in this Game of Thrones war, losing is not an option, folks. I don't think people realize what is at stake here. Losing this war of supremacy between the US and China, losing it is not an option. It's not an option. In the Game of Thrones, either you win or you die. There are only two options. Either you win or you die. Yeah, so that's really, for me, like what I would like to say about that. And I would also like Democrats, the left, the liberals, to consider these policies. Put aside the fact that you don't like Trump. These issues are not about Trump. These issues also affect your people in your states, in California, in Illinois, in New York, all of the liberal states. This issue affects everyone. This is not a red or blue issue. This is not a liberal or conservative issue. This is a matter of, will America still be supreme in the next 50 years? Yes or no? And if your answer is yes, then the United States needs to start thinking about taking industrialization seriously. You can just choose one sector, pharmaceuticals, and make a choice that says, okay, in the next 10 years, we want 50% of all the pharmaceutical drugs that are consumed in the United States to be manufactured stateside. And then you go to the next sector, and then the next sector. Obviously, you can't do all of these things all at once. I'm just choose the sector that poses the highest risk, And I'm glad the fact that everyone now is in agreement that you need to protect your steel and aluminum sector. No one is arguing about that, because a country that doesn't have steel and doesn't have aluminum is not a country. Aluminum and steel are so ubiquitous in our lives, then everything, absolutely everything. And you absolutely cannot depend on China or on anyone, even on Canada, for your steel and aluminum. So I'm glad that no one is arguing about that now. Yeah. But with that said, yeah, no, cheers, folks. Let me know what you think. I'll check your comments later. And yeah, this is something that really, really, like, it concerns me a lot, and it terrifies me. It terrifies me. It terrifies the shit out of me. The United States needs to start taking its industrial supremacy seriously. And I'm not even thinking now about the issues around AI and all of that. A lot of that stuff is just overblown and it's overly hyped. It's on the simple things like who is making your cars? Who is making your drugs? Who is making your washing machines? Things like that. Who is manufacturing the products that are found in your technology, like in the jets and in military equipment, and that is rare earth minerals. Who is doing all of that? Who is producing it? And if that stuff is being produced by your adversaries, hey folks, one other thing, I actually did make a video about this. There are certain nuclear radioisotopes that are used in the medical field who are found nowhere else in the world other than Russia. I don't know if you folks are aware of that. There are certain products who American hospitals, American medical schools can't operate without them. And they are found nowhere else other than, but one mine produces them in Russia, one plant produces them in Russia. How did you let that happen? How? Explain that to me. Okay, folks. Cheers.